Buddy, I won't ask you again. Step out of the car.
I will, as soon as you tell me the reason. I have a right to know.
The smell alone is enough. You're clearly in possession of drugs.
Not. I know exactly what that smell is, because actually I'm a DEA officer.
Yeah, okay, I'm done playing games with you. Get out of the car, you're under arrest.
At 9:23 p.m. on Route 65, just outside Dallas, Texas, a 12-year veteran police officer made a decision based on a smell he claimed to detect, a skin color he could clearly see, and an assumption that would cost him everything. His body camera was recording every word, every gesture, every moment of what was about to unfold. He had no idea that the man he was about to arrest had spent the last 8 years infiltrating drug cartels. No idea he testified in 47 federal cases, and absolutely no idea that his own body camera footage would be dissected by Internal Affairs, the FBI's Civil Rights Division, and used as evidence in a federal civil rights lawsuit that would end his career. Before we dive into what happened next, if you're someone who believes that knowledge of your rights is the first line of defense against abuse of power, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. This story is about to show you exactly why credentials don't matter when prejudice is in the driver's seat. And drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, because what happened on that Texas highway could happen anywhere in America. Derek Johnson, 34 years old, bachelor's degree in criminal justice from Howard University, 8 years with the Drug Enforcement Administration, 47 successful federal prosecutions, decorated for valor twice, and on that June evening, he was driving home from a joint task force meeting with Dallas PD, ironically, a meeting about improving community relations, when he noticed the patrol car behind him. He wasn't speeding, 38 in a 40, both hands visible at 10 and 2, registration current, inspection sticker valid. He'd learned a long time ago that driving while black meant doing everything perfectly and still being pulled over. This would be his third stop in 6 months. Never a ticket, always a warning. Always the same questions about where he's going, where he's been, what he does for a living. The lights came on at 9:19 p.m. Derek signaled, slowed, pulled into a well-lit gas station parking lot. Engine off, hands on the wheel, waited. And waited. Officer McMillan sat in his patrol car for almost 3 minutes. Running the plates, Derek knew, checking for warrants that wouldn't exist, making him sweat, maybe. The power play was familiar. Let them wait, let them wonder, let them know who's in control. When McMillan finally approached, Derek took a deep breath. This was going to be another one of those stops. He could feel it. McMillan's flashlight beam hit Derek's face first, bright, deliberate, then swept the interior of his car, passenger seat, back seat, returned to Derek's face. License and registration, McMillan said. No greeting, no explanation for the stop. Absolutely, Derek said calmly. Can you tell me why you pulled me over? License and registration first. Derek reached slowly for his glove box, called out every movement. I'm reaching for my glove box now, getting my registration and insurance. Retrieved the documents. Now I'm reaching for my wallet, back pocket, got his license. Handed everything through the window. McMillan took them without a word, disappeared back to his patrol car. 4 minutes this time. When he came back, his body language had changed. Shoulders squared, jaw tight. The flashlight was pointed down now, but Derek could see his face clearly in the gas station lights, and he recognized that expression. He'd seen it in interrogation rooms, in courtrooms, in the eyes of defendants who knew they were caught but weren't ready to admit it. It was the look of someone who'd made up their mind before they had all the facts. Mr. Johnson, McMillan said, putting deliberate emphasis on the Mr. You're in a pretty nice car for someone from your neighborhood. Derek felt his jaw clench, forced it to relax. I live in Preston Hollow. My neighborhood is pretty nice. Is there a problem with my documentation? Where are you coming from tonight? A work meeting. Am I being cited for something? What kind of work? I'm a federal agent. DEA. Can you tell me the reason for this stop? McMillan's eyes narrowed. Uh-huh. Sure you are. Your taillight is out. Derek glanced in his mirror. Both lights clearly working, reflecting red off the gas station's white concrete. Officer, both my tail lights are functioning. You can see them from here. Failed to signal when you changed lanes about a mile back. I didn't change lanes. I've been in the right lane since I left the parking garage downtown. You were weaving. I wasn't weaving, and I think we both know it. McMillan leaned down, his face now level with Derek's window. You getting smart with me, boy? There it was. Boy. In that particular tone, the one that carries centuries of weight, Derek felt the familiar heat rise in his chest. He'd heard it before, from suspects, from witnesses, from people who looked at his badge and his skin color and couldn't reconcile the two. But from another cop, on an official stop, that was new. I'm being respectful and factual, Derek said, keeping his voice level, and I'm asking you, as is my right, to provide the legal basis for this stop. Step out of the vehicle. On what grounds? I smell marijuana. Derek almost laughed. Almost, because this was textbook. When you can't justify the stop, manufacture probable cause, claim a smell that can't be objectively verified, escalate the situation until the driver gets frustrated, then claim the frustration is suspicious behavior. Officer McMillan, Derek said, reading his name badge. There is no marijuana in this vehicle. There is no smell of marijuana. And inventing probable cause is a violation of my Fourth Amendment rights and your duty as a law enforcement officer. You trying to tell me how to do my job? I'm reminding you of the constitutional limitations on your job. Under Rodriguez v. United States, you can't extend a traffic stop beyond its original purpose without reasonable suspicion. Under Terry v. Ohio, that suspicion must be specific and articulable. A fabricated smell doesn't qualify. McMillan's face went from stern to furious, red creeping up his neck. Oh, so you're a lawyer now too? I work with lawyers every day, federal prosecutors, putting away actual drug dealers, while you're out here harassing citizens for driving through your jurisdiction. Buddy, I won't ask you again, step out of the car. I will as soon as you tell me the reason. I have a right to know. The smell alone is enough. You're clearly in possession of drugs. Derek couldn't help it. He smirked. I'm not. I know exactly what that smell is, because actually, I'm a DEA officer. McMillan's hand moved to his service weapon. Yeah, sure you are. Get out of the car. You're under arrest. For what crime? Possession of a controlled substance and obstruction. I'm a federal agent. I'm going to reach for my credentials slowly. They're in my jacket pocket. Derek moved his hand with exaggerated care, pulled out the leather credential case, opened it to show his badge and ID card, held it up to the window. McMillan snatched it from his hand, examined it under his flashlight. Derek watched his face, saw the moment it registered. The badge was real. The ID was real. This wasn't some street dealer with a fake badge bought online. This was an actual federal agent, and everything McMillan had just said and done was now documented on his own body camera in an interaction with someone who knew exactly how illegal it all was. McMillan stood there for a long moment, turning the credential case over in his hands. Derek could see the wheels turning, could practically hear the internal monologue. How do I get out of this? How do I save face? How do I make this look like anything other than what it obviously is? This could be fake, McMillan finally said, but his voice had lost its certainty. The words came out flat, unconvincing even to himself. Call it in. The number's on the back of the ID card. DEA Dallas Field Office. They'll confirm my status in about 30 seconds. McMillan pulled out his cell phone, not his radio. Derek noticed that immediately. He didn't want this call going over official channels where it would be logged, where other officers might hear, where his sergeant might ask why he needed to verify federal credentials during what should have been a routine traffic stop. Derek listened as McMillan spoke quietly to someone on the phone, gave his badge number, read Derek's credentials, waited. His expression shifted from defensive to resigned. He ended the call without saying goodbye. They confirmed, McMillan said. I know they did. Why didn't you identify yourself immediately? Derek leaned forward slightly, kept his hands visible on the steering wheel. Because I shouldn't have to. Because my credentials don't make this stop any more or less constitutional. Because every citizen, regardless of whether they're a federal agent, has the right to ask for reasonable suspicion before being detained and searched. Because if I flash a badge and suddenly I'm treated with respect, what does that say about how you treat everyone else who doesn't have one? The question hung in the air. McMillan opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. You were just what? Doing your job? Your job is to have reasonable suspicion before initiating a stop. Your job is to articulate that suspicion when asked. Your job is to respect constitutional rights regardless of who you're dealing with. Instead, you profiled me, lied about your reasons, fabricated probable cause, and escalated when I exercised my rights. That's not police work. That's abuse of authority. McMillan stood there, Derek's credentials in one hand, his flashlight in the other. Derek could see the calculation happening, could see him trying to figure out how to de-escalate without admitting he'd screwed up, how to maintain authority while backing away from an arrest that would never survive scrutiny. The smell is probably coming from your work clothes, McMillan finally said. You probably handle drugs in your job. My work clothes are in an evidence locker at my office. I'm wearing a suit, and the smell you claimed to detect 3 minutes ago has now become probably coming from something else, which means it was never there in the first place. Look, I'm trying to cut you some slack here. I don't want slack. I want you to articulate your reasonable suspicion for this stop. Because so far, you've claimed a taillight that works, a lane change that didn't happen, weaving that you have no evidence of, and a smell that you're now admitting you're not even sure about. That's not police work. That's harassment. McMillan took a step back from the car. You're free to go. No. That clearly wasn't the response McMillan expected. What do you mean no? I mean, I'm not leaving until you give me your badge number, your supervisor's name, and information about how to file a formal complaint, because this stop was unlawful. Your questioning was based on racial profiling, and that comment about my neighborhood combined with calling me boy makes this a civil rights violation. I never said anything about race. You didn't have to. Your actions said it all. You saw a black man in a nice car and decided he must be a criminal. Then you threw every pretextual excuse at the wall, hoping one would stick, and when I exercised my rights, you escalated instead of de-escalating. That's the definition of bias-based policing. I was just doing my job. Your job is to protect and serve, not to profile and harass, not to fabricate probable cause, not to violate constitutional rights just because someone doesn't immediately submit to unlawful commands. McMillan's radio crackled. A female voice asked for his status. He keyed the mic on his shoulder. 10-8, everything's fine here. But everything wasn't fine. Derek could see it in the way McMillan kept glancing at the camera mounted on his own chest. The way his hand kept moving to it, probably remembering too late that it had been recording this entire encounter. The way his shoulders had gone from squared and confident to slightly hunched and defensive. Badge number, Derek said, again. McMillan rattled it off, gave him the name of his sergeant, the address of the station, all the information Derek would need. Then he practically threw Derek's credentials back through the window and walked away without another word. Derek sat there for a moment, let the adrenaline cycle through, let his hands stop shaking. Then he drove home. He didn't sleep much, spent most of the night replaying the stop in his mind, making notes about every detail he could remember. Times, specific statements, the exact sequence of events. By sunrise, he had a comprehensive timeline of everything that had happened. He'd learned this documentation process from cases he'd worked. Drug dealers who got arrested on bad stops had their cases thrown out, not because they were innocent, but because the stops were unconstitutional. Evidence obtained illegally can't be used. It's called the exclusionary rule. And he'd seen dozens of guilty people walk free because officers cut corners, violated procedures, or lied about their reasons for initiating contact. The irony wasn't lost on him. The same constitutional protections that frustrated him in his work watching dangerous people go free on technicalities were now his shield against abuse. That's what the Constitution does. It protects everyone, even when that protection feels inconvenient, even when it means guilty people walk. Because the alternative, a system where police can stop, search, and arrest anyone based on hunches and bias, is far worse than letting some guilty people slip through. At 7 a.m., he called FBI Special Agent Adrian Garcia, his liaison on Joint Task Force operations, explained what had happened. McMillan's body camera had captured everything. Within 2 hours, Garcia called back. Derek, this is bad, really bad. That officer just handed you a federal civil rights case on a silver platter. I know, ACLU is already interested. They've been tracking this department. This isn't the first complaint against McMillan. It's the ninth. 9 other people had reported Officer Victor McMillan for misconduct, and he was still on the streets, still pulling people over, still violating rights with impunity. Because those 9 people probably didn't have badges, probably didn't have lawyers on speed dial, probably didn't have a wife who was herself a civil rights attorney. Why wasn't he stopped after complaint number 3, Derek asked, or 5, or 7? Garcia sighed. Same reason most cops with patterns never get stopped. No video evidence, conflicting statements, he said, she said. Internal Affairs investigates, finds no conclusive proof of misconduct, closes the case. The complaints go in his file, but they don't trigger discipline unless there's something undeniable. Like this. So 9 people had to suffer through his bias before someone with enough documentation and legal knowledge could force accountability. That's how it works, unfortunately. That's how it's going to stop working, Derek said. Do you think body cameras should be mandatory for all law enforcement, including local police? Let me know what you think in the comments, because what happened next shows exactly why documentation is so crucial. Garcia immediately contacted the Dallas Police Department's Internal Affairs Division. Within hours, they requested McMillan's body camera footage from the stop. The footage was damning. Every word Derek had spoken, Every changing justification McMillan had given, every lie about taillights and lane changes, every racial dog whistle, all captured on McMillan's own camera. But it wasn't just Derek's complaint that triggered action. Garcia also contacted Dallas City Council member Karen Brown, who had been pushing for police accountability measures for 3 years. He reached out to Chief of Police Michael Davis, who had publicly stated his commitment to eliminating racial bias in traffic stops. And he notified the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division, which had been monitoring the Dallas PD for pattern and practice violations. On June 17th, exactly 9 days after the stop, Officer Victor McMillan was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. The investigation wasn't just about Derek's stop. Once the FBI started pulling records, they found a pattern. Officer McMillan had made 347 traffic stops in the previous year. 68% of those stops were of black drivers, in a district that was only 22% black. Of those stops, only 9% resulted in citations, which meant 91% of the stops were pretextual initiated without actual violations, escalated through fabricated probable cause, and ended without formal charges because there was never anything illegal happening in the first place. The FBI's review went deeper. They pulled audio recordings from McMillan's patrol car computer, cross-referenced his radio calls with dispatch logs, interviewed 47 people he'd stopped in the past 18 months. What emerged was a disturbing portrait of an officer who had essentially been conducting a personal campaign of harassment disguised as law enforcement. One woman, Samantha Martinez, a nurse at Children's Medical Center, had been stopped 3 times by McMillan in 8 months. Same area, same time of evening after her shift ended. Each time he claimed a different violation, rolling through a stop sign, expired inspection, suspicious vehicle matching a bolo description. Each time he searched her car with a drug dog after she refused consent. Each time the dog alerted, which she later learned happens in 80% of stops regardless of actual contraband presence. Each time no drugs were found. Each time she was released with a warning and shaking hands. She'd filed a complaint after the second stop. It went nowhere. After the third, she changed her route home, adding 15 minutes to her commute just to avoid driving through McMillan's patrol zone. Another man, Christopher Wilson, a software engineer, was stopped twice in 1 week. Both times, McMillan claimed he looked nervous. Both times, he demanded to search the vehicle. The second time, when Wilson invoked his Fourth Amendment rights, McMillan made him wait on the side of the highway for 45 minutes while a K-9 unit was dispatched. The dog never alerted. Wilson missed his daughter's birthday dinner. His complaint also went nowhere because there was no video evidence of misconduct, just a legal detention that went on far longer than necessary. The pattern was clear. McMillan targeted people who looked like they didn't belong in middle-class neighborhoods. People whose cars were nice enough to suggest economic success, but whose skin color triggered his assumptions about criminality. He would initiate stops on the flimsiest pretext, escalate through questioning designed to provoke, and when people asserted their rights, he would punish them with delays, searches, and the psychological toll of feeling targeted in their own neighborhoods. The investigation revealed something else, something Derek's sharp observation had caught but the department had missed. In his interview with Internal Affairs, McMillan claimed the stop was legitimate based on a broken taillight. When investigators examined Derek's car, both taillights were functioning perfectly. When they pulled maintenance records, both lights had been replaced 6 months earlier and had logged 0 malfunctions. When they reviewed McMillan's body camera footage, which he'd conveniently forgotten to mention, initially it showed Derek's vehicle with both taillights clearly illuminated before the stop was initiated. He'd lied, not just to Derek, not just in his report, but to Internal Affairs investigators, under oath. The Internal Affairs report was delivered to Chief Davis on August 2nd, 47 pages. Derek obtained it later through a Freedom of Information Act request. The key findings were devastating. Officer McMillan initiated the stop without reasonable suspicion. He fabricated multiple justifications: tail light, lane change, weaving, smell. He engaged in racially biased conduct, comments about neighborhood, use of boy. He failed to de-escalate when confronted with evidence of his mistake. He filed a false report claiming the stop was consensual and professional. He lied to investigators about his reasons for the stop. The recommendation was clear: immediate termination. On August 9th, Officer Victor McMillan's 12-year career in law enforcement ended. The termination letter cited gross misconduct, racial bias in policing, false statements under oath, and conduct unbecoming an officer. His appeal was filed on August 16th. It was denied on September 3rd. after the appeals board watched the body camera footage and reviewed the pattern of complaints. But Derek wasn't done. On September 15th, with representation from the ACLU and his wife's law firm, Derek filed a federal civil rights lawsuit under Section 1983 against Officer McMillan personally and the Dallas Police Department. The complaint alleged violations of his Fourth Amendment rights unlawful stop and detention and 14th Amendment rights equal protection under the law. He sought both compensatory damages and systemic reforms. The lawsuit detailed not just Derek's experience, but the pattern revealed by the FBI's investigation. It cited 174 traffic stops that fit the same profile: black drivers in middle-class neighborhoods, fabricated probable cause, no citations issued, and complaints of racial bias. It included declarations from 12 other drivers who had been stopped by McMillan under similar circumstances. And it demanded specific policy changes: mandatory racial bias training, data collection on all traffic stops, early intervention systems for officers with complaint patterns, and community oversight of disciplinary decisions. The city of Dallas fought it for 6 months, filed motions to dismiss, argued qualified immunity, claimed McMillan's actions were within his discretion. But the body camera footage was damning. The pattern was clear. And the FBI's concurrent investigation, which eventually expanded to a broader review of the department, created pressure the city couldn't ignore. The city's defense rested on a familiar argument. Even if McMillan made mistakes, he was protected by qualified immunity, the doctrine that shields officers from civil liability unless they violate clearly established constitutional rights that any reasonable officer would know. The problem with this defense? Derek had cited the specific case law during the stop itself: Terry v. Ohio, Rodriguez v. United States, Delaware v. Prowse. He told McMillan on camera exactly which rights were being violated and which cases established those rights. Hard to argue the law wasn't clearly established when the victim was literally teaching constitutional law to the officer in real time. The city's attorneys also tried arguing that the stop was justified under the community caretaking exception, that McMillan was simply checking on a vehicle that appeared out of place. But the footage undermined that completely. McMillan never asked if Derek needed help, never expressed concern for his welfare. The very first words were a demand for documents, and his justifications kept changing: taillight, lane change, weaving, smell, which showed this was never about caretaking. It was about finding a reason to justify a stop that shouldn't have happened. By December 2024, the city's legal team realized they were going to lose. The body camera evidence was too strong. The pattern was too clear. The FBI investigation was uncovering too many similar incidents. And Derek wasn't just another plaintiff who would accept a nuisance settlement to make it go away. He had the resources and the determination to take this to trial, where a jury would watch that footage and where the city would have to explain why they kept an officer with 9 complaints on the streets. On March 22, 2025, the case settled. The terms included $475,000 to Derek for damages and attorney's fees. But the real victory wasn't the money, it was the consent decree. The Dallas Police Department agreed to implement mandatory body cameras for all officers with no discretion to turn them off. They created an early warning system flagging officers with patterns of complaints. They required supervisory review of all pretextual stops within 24 hours. They established a community oversight board with subpoena power. They conducted quarterly audits for racial disparities in traffic stops. They mandated annual implicit bias training for all officers. They instituted a Know Your Rights card given to every person stopped. And they created a public database of all traffic stops, searchable by officer, location, and demographics. What happened to Officer McMillan? He tried getting hired by 3 other police departments in Texas. All 3 rejected him once they reviewed his file. He attempted work as a private security guard, but was let go after 3 months when clients complained about his aggressive approach. Last anyone heard, he'd left law enforcement entirely, probably for the best. What about Derek? He's still with the DEA, still doing the work he's passionate about, but he's also become an advocate for reform. He speaks at police academies about constitutional policing. He testifies before city councils about accountability measures, and he's partnered with the ACLU to create a training program for officers on how to conduct traffic stops that are both safe and constitutional. The body camera footage from his stop has become required viewing at the Dallas Police Academy, not as a gotcha moment, but as a teaching tool. Here's what happens when bias replaces judgment. Here's what happens when ego replaces law. Here's how a routine traffic stop can expose systemic problems. Here's why the badge comes with responsibility, not just authority. 6 months after the settlement, the data started showing results. Traffic stops of black drivers in Derek's district dropped by 34%, but citations, actual violations that warranted stops, remained constant, which meant the decrease wasn't in enforcement, it was in harassment. Officers were still doing their jobs. They just weren't profiling people while doing it. I reached out to Derek for this story, asked him what he wanted people to understand about that night. His answer was simple. This could have gone a completely different way. If I didn't have a badge, federal connections, and a wife who's a civil rights attorney, I might have ended up arrested, or worse. How many people go through this every day without the resources to fight back? That's the real story. I just happen to have the tools to force accountability. He's right. The real lesson in all of this isn't that one bad cop got fired. Is that a system that had allowed him to make 347 stops with a 68% racial disparity finally had to confront its own failures. One traffic stop, 15 minutes, one body camera, and an entire department had to change how it polices. If this story resonated with you, do me a favor and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Hit that subscribe button if you want more stories about standing up for your rights. And drop a comment, let me know what your biggest takeaway was from Derek's experience, because these conversations matter. Thanks for watching.